Welcome to Forthright. I'm Sue Lonnie Madsen with a column and commentary on the challenge of what to do with sexually violent predators and on what Governor Jay Inslee and Attorney General Bob Ferguson think is the best plan. Titled, Predators in the Neighborhood, as published Thursday, May 25th, 2023 in the Spokesman Review. When apex predators are reintroduced into the natural environment, neighbors get nervous. But this column isn't about cougars or wolves or grizzly bears potentially menacing school children at rural bus stops. This is about a threat to kids everywhere. It's about sexually violent human predators. When our rural village was notified in 2017 by the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office of a Level 2 sex offender moving in, I wrote about the impact on a community and the trade-offs involved. Because we had knowledge, we could take precautions. The cross-country team changed its running routes, and the school was extra vigilant around the playground to protect potential victims, albeit curbing students' freedom. There's the trade-off in play, balancing the convicted individual's freedom against protection for society and the freedom of many individuals. In 1990, Washington passed the Community Protection Act, establishing the public's right to know when a Level 2 or Level 3 registered sex offender is moving into their neighborhood. Until about 10 years ago, civil commitment meant most Level 3 sex offenders were housed securely on McNeil Island. The barrier of a long, cold swim to shore meant the islanders could have more freedom, and so could the communities around them. It was widely supported until about 10 years ago, said political activist Glenn Morgan. Now we're seeing attempts to change classifications and change public notifications, actively supported by the Inslee and Ferguson administration as policy, end quote. Morgan began digging into the topic after an attempt to locate a private, less restrictive alternative facility in his own neighborhood in Tenino, Washington. He described one example of a man with a history of victimizing 50 to 60 children in multiple states as a youth organization volunteer, registered as Level 3, likely to reoffend, and the system attempting to redefine him as Level 2 for easier release. Anyone who is appalled upon reading the stories of victims of rape, incest, and pedophilia should be equally dismayed at letting the violators off the island. Again, quoting Morgan, nobody in the system cares about the impact on the community. Sexually violent predators, the legal term for the worst of the worst on McNeil Island, have been released back into neighborhoods across Washington for a while now. Spokane has a least restrictive alternative located on Lincoln Street, not far from the Spokane Arena. In the past few years, the Spokane Police Department has publicly expressed frustration at the lack of notification when sexually violent predators are moved into the city, but community response has been muted. The Tenino LRA, proposed in 2022, was to be owned and operated under a generous state contract by a former state employee. Angela Rinaldo, Supreme Living LLC, would have been paid a maximum of $107,858 per month for housing 5 men in a $1.1 million country home. Sure would make it easy to pay off that mortgage and flip the property at a profit, especially when the minimally trained staff are only being paid $18 an hour, according to Morgan. One might expect Washington Democrats, who are aghast at the idea of private prisons, to object to private LRA operators, but they are reluctant to push back on agency policies, according to Representative Dan Griffey, Republican of Allen. He does not support private correctional facilities at any level. Quote, if society wants to enforce a societal norm, then society has a responsibility to carry through, Griffey said. Griffey and other Republican legislators have attempted to put more effective community notification laws in place prior to SVP release and got nowhere in the last 2 sessions. In 2023, 3 bills were introduced and died. Griffey had proposed a 3-year moratorium on citing any LRA outside of McNeil Island while working on a comprehensive statewide policy. 2 other bills added notification requirements. House Minority Leader Representative Drew Stokesbury, Republican of Auburn, worked with a few Democrats to insert a provision into the legislation implementing the operating budget to require a limited pilot program. The intent, according to the section vetoed by the governor, was, quote, to provide notice and an opportunity to comment to any community in which the department intends to propose placement of a sexually violent predator, end quote. And in addition, if the site is within a mile of, quote, the exterior boundary of the reservation of any federally recognized Indian tribe, the department must first consult with the tribe," end quote. Governor Inslee went out of his way to veto these short, simple sections in a 1,405-page bill. According to the governor's veto letter, the Department of Social and Health Services claimed it would be administratively burdensome to notify communities of a dangerous predator in their midst. There are business owners all over the state who would love to use that excuse to stop complying with all sorts of minutiae generated by the legislature. Protecting public safety is not an administrative burden. It is a primary duty of government. Well, there's a couple of abbreviations there. LRA, less restrictive alternative, is what it's called under a civil commitment. And that's what they're trying to do in getting people off McNeil Island, is get them into these LRAs. My editor's first question was, isn't the community supposed to be notified when a level 2 or level 3 sex offender moves into a neighborhood? And yes, they are, but the offender is the one who is required to register with local law enforcement, and they have a long window of time in which to comply. These sexually violent predators are at McNeil Island under civil commitment and are the responsibility of the Department of Social and Health Services, not the Department of Corrections, and DSHS treats them as patients rather than probable risks to society. As patients, they have privacy rights that people under the Department of Corrections jurisdiction do not. Governor Inslee and AG Ferguson have not been interested in requiring DSHS to notify communities when transferring these men, originally diagnosed and determined to be likely to reoffend, out into communities. So at West Yellowstone, there's an educational venue and wildlife park called the Grizzly Wolf and Discovery Center. There are 3 packs of wolves on exhibit, all born in captivity and unable to live in the wild. And then there are the grizzly bears. All of the bears come to the center after becoming too accustomed to seeking out human activity and habitat as a place to find food, resulting in much property damage and risk of injury to people. The alternative is euphemistically called lethal removal, or in other words, a death sentence. If not removed by wildlife officials to the center, they also risk being lethally removed by a potential victim in self-defense. Coram the bear developed a bad habit of walking up onto porches and rummaging in pickups for food. For his own good, Coram the bear was removed from society and provided with safe and secure habitat. That's what McNeil Island has provided since it was established as a special commitment center by the legislature in 1998 under the control of DSHS. McNeil Island is to sexually violent predators what the Grizzly and Wolf Discovery Center is to apex predators who are a hazard to the rest of society, making them a hazard to themselves. Society has a right to safety and security from dangerous human predators. Sexually violent predators is not an inflammatory term. It's statutorily defined and a descriptive designation for these men. They have a high likelihood to offend again, just like Coram the bear. Unlike the wildlife officials dealing humanely with problem bears to protect the bears and the community, Governor Inslee and Bob Ferguson have no problem locating them in your neighborhood. Thank you for joining me for this edition of Forthright, and be sure to like and subscribe for notifications of new content on Substack.